And as advertised, I have Williams County Sheriff Tom Kochert with me. Tom, good to have you in here this morning.
Thank you, Jim. Good morning.
Hey, you know, when I called you a week or so ago, it was, hey, come on in. Let's talk a little bit about, what's going on, how the first few months are in the Sheriff's Department. And that's where I really want to start. Now, we got a little newspaper article that happened over the weekend, and we're going to get to that one here in a minute. How's that? But
that's great.
My initial reason to have you in here is what I've always done with all the sheriffs in Williams County since I've been doing this. I like to have them in and just get a feel for where everything's going, how everything's going, and we'll get to the newspaper article here shortly. How's that? Huh?
That's fantastic. Thanks, Jim.
How is everything going right now?
Well, Jim, I would say, of course, everyone will have, their own opinion, but I'm not sure how it could be going, any better than what it is. We've developed some really good relationships around the office. We've opened up doors with other county agencies, with the Williams County prosecutor especially, broken down some barriers there between those two offices and have a great working relationship now. We have, as far as physical developments around the office, we are doing some inventory control. We have removed a light pole from the parking lot, which I know sounds silly, but they tell me there's been over 100 property damage accidents because of that light pole since they moved into that. So if you work in that building, you know what I'm talking about. That light pole needed to go, and it's gone. We've also made some strides with the Ohio State Patrol, have met with Lieutenant Ashenfelder a couple times, and a great relationship there with the patrol, and that's really going to help take some of the traffic crash burden off of my deputies. And to that end, we're working on what I call a new patrol dynamic, which will expand the deputies throughout the county. So the coverage is going to increase, as well as lightening their burden because of area that they have to travel. And we're almost ready to start launching that. We've made strides with Williams County Communications, improved access between those two offices. So all in all, morale, the atmosphere, some of the guys are saying that they're very pleased and that they are very proud to work there.
Yeah. Well, you know what? It's always been a group of guys that do a real good job for my money around Williams County. The Sheriff's Department's always been, obviously there's been a bump here, there'll be a bump there, there'll always be a bump somewhere, okay?
Sure.
If you expect everything's going to run perfect, then you're not living in the world that you and I are living in.
Right, that's simply not reality. And Jim, that's exactly what I have found. Chief Deputy Lehman and I could not be more proud. The professionalism, the efficiency that we found when we took office. We got the guys on the range here not long ago, and that training was geared towards, if you turn on the TV, all the stuff that's going on as far as police use of force, etc. And these deputies, they have responded to that. They all had a really good time at the training, but the work that we're seeing coming in from these guys, the arrests that they're making, their attitude, their morale, the way they do their job, their presentation to the public, Jim, I couldn't be more proud. They are a fantastic group of law enforcement officers, and it's very humbling to be able to lead them, especially to give them some new training opportunities, maybe things that they haven't done before, and just make them even better. And the ultimate winner here is going to be the citizens of Williams County.
Yeah. A lot of folks, when you were elected, said, hey, here's a guy who really has never been a sheriff. He's never really been in, quote unquote, law enforcement in his life before, okay?
Sure. Sure. Oh, yeah. We got that in. And actually, we used to get that even when I was working for the state as a wildlife officer.
Sure.
We would get the questions. But, most folks don't know that, you have to know what a sheriff's deputy knows before you can be a wildlife officer.
Sure.
It's the same academy. So it's actually an advanced training over and above, and plus with the management classes and courses through the Ohio State University and the opportunities that the state gave. And I think just having been in office as long as I have been, the one thing that I am really drawing on a lot is the diversity that my former occupation as a wildlife officer, my work unit encompassed 20 counties. That's 1/4 of the state of Ohio.
Sure.
Maumee River, Lake Erie, and then 20 counties here in the corner. I got to see every police department, every sheriff's agency, every law enforcement agency, run the alphabet of federal agencies that we worked with, conducted search warrants with, and I got to observe in training environments and in real-world environments, whether on the water, on the land, or anywhere, backing up any of those other law enforcement agencies in every conceivable law enforcement situation that you can come up with. I have learned that diversity and just seeing, I now have a catalog in my mind of that works, this doesn't, do this, don't do that, because I've seen it, and the ability to have seen all that, to have all that laid before you. I think that kind of sets me apart amongst even former sheriffs here, as far as the diversity and the scope that I've been able to witness and the bank that I can draw from.
Because you've worked with several sheriffs. With that big of a territory, you're working with 20 different sheriffs.
Absolutely, 20 different sheriffs. And even here in Williams County, Al Word had just been elected when I got assigned Williams County. So I worked with Al through all of his terms, Kevin Beck, and then Steve. And Steve was the one that swore me in as a special deputy, and I conducted firearms training for all the road deputies, even as a special deputy, and worked the fair, et cetera. But you're right. It's just been one of my most valuable resources is that catalog that I have of diversity and seeing the full spectrum of law enforcement. And frankly, I'm stealing ideas. The ones that worked, the ones that were out there, some of these bigger agencies, if it worked, I'm going to steal their idea and we're going to use it here. And if it didn't work, we're either going to get rid of it or it's not going to come here.
Between now and election day, because nobody knows how the election is going to go in the fall, you've got a real strange situation going on at this point in time, because you took over as an interim, not as an interim, as a regular sheriff, okay, in an interim basis, okay, until the next election. What are some of the things that you've got on your radar and in your sights here to try to accomplish in the next couple of months?
Well, I've already ran over some of the accomplishments that we've already done. Training is huge. I know during the primary campaign that I brought up training a lot, and I ran on that principle because, again, as I said there, when something bad happens, and I tell this to the deputies all the time, when something bad happens, you're not going to rise to the occasion. You never rise to the occasion. You're going to sink to the level of your training. And we are going to, my job, I believe, is to manage that office as effectively and efficiently as is absolutely possible to erase any perception of any impropriety. But when it comes to training the deputies, to have their level of training at an absolute peak, so that even when they, quote, sink to that level, that's still going to put them far and above any civil litigation that may come their way or any physical harm. The ultimate goal, Jim, they're coming home every night.
Yeah.
That's my goal.
That's the important part. Does this arrangement make it tougher for you to do the job, knowing that you have somewhat of a limited time before you have to be reelected?
There is, anytime you have to campaign, that's always going to take some of your time. So Al Word told me before my appointment that you have absolutely no idea how many hours you're going to work, and a truer statement was never spoken. It's simply, you're never done working. I go and I'll say, quote, I go home at night, and you might take off the uniform, but you're always thinking. You're always, and I'm scribbling notes, leaving them around the house. I'm making a phone call here, a phone call there. I'm thinking, okay, tomorrow we should do this, this, and that. Trying to organize what needs done first. Jim, in a way, I call it the Apollo 13 list. If you remember the line, gentlemen, we have 835 things to do, and we are on number 2. Yeah. And that's exactly where we are. I have a lot to do. We've identified a lot of areas that need some work, but the list of accomplishments is just phenomenal. Just the other day, I found that, that one of the part of the infrastructure there in the office had not been working for several months, if not, over a year, and they brought it to my attention, and the very next day it was up and running. And that's when the deputies or the staff, and speaking of the staff, you simply could not ask for a better staff than what I have. I mean, a lot of times I don't even have to do that. I mean, no pun intended there, but I don't even have to ask. It's as though they're reading my mind. They already know where I'm going. They have it done. They're thinking ahead, and I could not be more pleased with the efficiency and the professionalism of everybody at that office. But when when you try to put into perspective all the things that we've already accomplished, and the goal is for this office to become a well-oiled machine, for the perception, even the perception of impropriety to be erased from this. And to that end, here just coming up shortly, I have a meeting with the sheriffs in the tri-state area, both DeKalb, Steuben, and Hillsdale County, and we're going to rework an agreement that Kevin Beck years ago had brought into play. So we're going to sit down and take a really hard look at that. None of the sheriffs that signed that are still sheriffs. So that's going to open up even more, and they are very like-minded with me. The goal here is to make this corner, this tri-state area, a very dangerous spot for those that would want to break the law.
Yeah. All right, let's get to the newspaper article now, okay? Because I've only got about 5 minutes or so, because I promised you I'd have you back on the road around 10:30 because you get a busy day.
Sure.
Okay? You pick up the paper on Saturday because there's no Friday paper. You pick up the Saturday paper, and all of a sudden there is a question as to what's going on. They've got a box all of a sudden that has popped up in the munitions room that nobody really knows anything about. First of all, give me a little background. What happened? What was going on there?
Sure. And Jim, it really is just this simple. As we spoke earlier, one of the things that Chief Deputy Lehman and I have been involved in is inventory and control to take stock. I think it's only prudent, since I am not responsible, to take stock of what I have. Mm-hmm. Even to that end, a lot of the deputies, some of their uniform and equipment items were not up to standard or needed replaced, and I've even instituted new inventory controls for the deputies and for their equipment, and those will be implemented. So that's what was going on as part of just a routine administrative inventory and control. In the arms room, there was a box of munitions. The paperwork that accompanied it was unclear as to whether this was still mine, i.e. county property needs to be put back in the sheriff's inventory, or if this was to be transferred out of the office. The only folks in the world who would be able to hand me the necessary paperwork, again, this is 2020, paper trail for every single thing you do. Paper trail. You have to, because if you signed for it, you're responsible for it, you better have a paper trail, where it's going, why it's going. That paperwork was missing. The only folks in the county that would have that paperwork would be the county commissioners. So I simply asked a question at the open session last Thursday. Can you please tell me what to do with this? Okay. That was the question. I mentioned no names. This was not in any way, shape, or form anything other than a simple, basic administrative question. I have a box of munitions that I am not responsible for. Could you please tell me what I am to do with this? The fact that that paperwork was absent, it would be subjective for me to comment on why.
Yeah, right. Is there not a procedure to deal with something like this? I know you've only been on the job for a couple of months, so there's obviously things that you're learning and working with and finding out every day.
Sure. In conversations with the commissioners, which, by the way, the commissioners and I have developed a fantastic working relationship. They've all been in the office one of my first purchases, with my out of my own pocket, was a good coffee pot for that very reason. Get the guys in the office, sit down, let's talk about this, have a wonderful working relationship with them. But it was explained to me even then, because I had 1,000,001 questions.
Sure.
You are correct when you first walk in there. Is that you don't even so much as throw away a broken piece of equipment or old discarded uniform items without making a list, keeping track of what it is, and certain items, you're going to need a resolution from the county commissioners, even to throw stuff away. And you don't transfer anything from office to office or anywhere without a resolution from the commissioners. So that was made abundantly clear to me. So, in the last regard, I simply thought, this is just a basic administrative question. Could I please have a copy of that? And we're done.
Yeah. In some ways, being an outside observer, okay, it seems like if the sheriff has to go to the commissioners to do something maybe as simple as transferring something that is needed by the group in Fort Wayne, okay, law enforcement in Fort Wayne, that almost gets to be a micromanaging issue at that point in time. Are the commissioners micromanaging not only you, but any sheriff that would be this, or is that the way you see this at all, Tom?
No, not at all. And again, I would go back to my relationship with them. Anytime that any law enforcement agency, and I mean any law enforcement agency, needs anything that I can provide them, manpower, munitions, weaponry, etc., they are absolutely going to get that. Without hesitation, without delay, they're going to get what they need to get the job done. But we live in 2020, when people are trying to defund the police, when people don't trust the police for paperwork snafus or alleged, the perceptions of impropriety oftentimes gets you in trouble faster than an actual impropriety.
Sure.
So, and those perceptions grow. So, are the commissioners micromanaging? Absolutely not. And they agree with me 100%. Somebody needs something, and you can say that it is an articulable reason, an exigent circumstance. Absolutely, they're going to get those items, but it being the day and age we live in, you've got to document after you do that we gave so-and-so this and that for this reason, this part came back, this part didn't, because unfortunately, investigators and auditors in this day and age need to see paper. Yeah. That's just, and I think it's only prudent and reasonable to expect that out of, especially your chief law enforcement officer.
Now, this again was not a situation where, because you have an election coming up in the fall, you're going to run against the gentleman who was, basically responsible for this box going back and forth. But this was in no way, from your side, a way to embarrass that person or the county commissioners to try to get that person. Because on social media, if you've watched the social media, this is just a way to try to win some points for the November election this fall.
Sure, and also understanding that it being an election year, anything that he says or anything that I say or do is going to be construed as political by the other side. And I don't think there's a win there. It's going to be a tit for tat back and forth between now and November. However, this was not, Jim. This was not. Absolutely. I had a box of munitions. I had to know what to do with them.
Sure.
The only people in the world that had the right paper for me to file so I could do that is the commissioners. I ask a question.
Yeah.
That is all I did.
And, one of the other questions before I let you go, too, was why not just pick up the phone and call, your predecessor and say, hey, what's going on with this box?
Well, again, thinking that this is a basic administrative function and that the paperwork I need is as simple as saying, hey, commissioners, I just simply need this and we're down the road. That's why I did. And it's, I didn't think that it was appropriate at the time to, again, I use the analogy, if you're building a house and you're putting on a roof and you run out of roofing nails, okay, you don't go to the flower shop, you go to the hardware store.
Sure.
So I needed paperwork that the only people in the world would have was the commissioners, I'm going to go to them first. That's the logical first step.
Okay. Paperwork for something like this in the future? I'm sure that is.
Well, again, if you recall, absolutely. If you recall, I mentioned several times, during the primary campaign, that state standard, and I'm not going to overburden. It's kind of funny. I'm not one that likes paperwork for the sake of paperwork. However, I am a stickler, and that's that state standard. You need to be able to articulate and document every single thing you do. Our main theme when we train the deputies now is, can you articulate? And that means tell me what you're doing, why you're doing it, and what gives you the right to do that. If I'm going to tell the deputies that, as their boss, as the chief law enforcement officer of this county, I think of all people, I should be the one holding county property assigned to me accountable. Accountability needs to start with me if I'm going to preach it, to the troops.
Sure. So I'm sure you and the commissioners have worked out some sort of a procedure if this ever comes up from now on at this point in time.
Well, sure. And that procedure starts with this simple communication, simple documentation, again, basic administrative policies and procedures. And yes, all those that again is on that list. It's all coming.
Dynamite. Tom Kochert, I appreciate your time today. I know you're a busy man. I appreciate, in all honesty, that we have two gentlemen who are going to try to vie to become the sheriff of Williams County that have good, high standards and are good, solid men from everything I could see. I don't want this to be a political question, and I don't think necessarily anybody wants it to be politics. This is just a day-to-day occurrence that's going to happen that happened at the newspaper, it sounds like.
Sure, absolutely.
So, thank you for your time today. Hopefully, we can get you in here on a regular basis.
Absolutely.
And, again, whoever wins the election in November, I want to try next year to make sure that they get in on a regular basis to kind of give us an update, because I do think it's important for the people in Williams County to know exactly what's happening in the Sheriff's Department.
Great, Jim. Look forward to talking with you.
Sheriff Kochert, thank you very much. It is now 10:35. It is time for me to pay some bills, get some news paid, and then back into Classic Hits on the Q 96.5.